I don't think this was a great article to have in Nature, frankly, because it points out to something that isn't really all that much of a problem, I don't think. If you've been watching this channel long enough, you know full well that I take a dim view of such organizations as Nature and Scientific American and Science Magazine, because they have tended to push things that seem to be much more ideologically driven than necessarily driven by science, which is what all three of them are supposed to be talking about. And so I saw this thing from Nature come up, and I thought to myself, what? Stop using summer and winter and the rest when inviting researchers to events. It's a small step, but it's necessary and inclusive. So I saw that and I thought to myself, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. And then I clicked on the link and read the article, and my kind of reaction was basically, because it's another kind of thing that is just, why, Nature? Why did you feel the need to publish this? And I will point out before I go any further with this, the ratio is fabulous. Oh, 3,700 comments to 661 likes. It failed pretty spectacularly, and we'll get to this. But if you're left wondering this, it leaves us wondering: are we invited at all into this season different from our own? What? Yes, you may be wondering that at this point. So allow me to show you. Okay. Seasons misgreetings. Why timing matters in global academia. Stop using winter, summer, and the rest when inviting researchers to events. It's a small step, but it's necessary and inclusive. Allow me to present a case that might be the opposite. Hello from the Southern Hemisphere, where the days are getting longer and temperatures are rising. Yet despite the clear signs of spring here, we find ourselves inundated with invitations to events that speak of fall or autumn, or newsletters announcing workshops that will run this coming winter. It leaves us wondering, are we invited at all into this season different from our own? But to echo Colin Wright with that, not really anything worth wondering at all. This curious oversight in which seasons instead of months are used for scheduling is especially puzzling in the scientific community, a group known for its precision and careful communication. Why do we, of all people, persist in relying on region-specific markers? What is even more baffling is that this takes place in our own fields of weather and climate science, with little regard to how different things might be outside the Northern Hemisphere. Two things on that front. Just to make a point, this is something you can look up fairly easily. Roughly 90% of the human population on Earth lives in the Northern Hemisphere. 90%. Why is that? Because there's actually a heck of a lot more land mass in the Northern Hemisphere than the Southern Hemisphere for people to live on. Logical reason. It makes entirely good sense. We don't have sea colonies or anything like that yet, unless you want to have everybody live on boats. That's not going to be a feasible place to have a whole bunch of people living. Just to make that particular point right away. The other thing is, okay, hold on. What if you don't know exactly when a conference is taking place? You're a planner. You don't know exactly when you're going to have it, but you know it's going to be between here and here. It's easier and straightforward, perhaps, to say the season, particularly if you know the place where it's going to be, because the season then thusly makes sense to just sort of narrow in on, okay, here's a time. It's as precise as we can make it, given that we don't know exactly when we're going to have this conference. We don't even know exactly in which month or which week or which days. Now, I will say also for the fields of weather and climate science, I would love to know exactly which newsletters this is, because I, on a bunch of those newsletters myself, because my longtime viewers will know here, I do work in climate also, actually. And I I've not seen those particular seasonal things come up. I have not seen conference this winter or conference this fall or anything like that. Actually, I have not seen that. I don't know what newsletters are referring to be perfectly honest with all that. So, yeah, so I question that part of it, just to be perfectly truthful. Give me some examples. I could be wrong, but give me some examples, but I question that. But you can be as precise as you can be, okay? A. B, 90% of the human population is the Northern Hemisphere, so it does make sense that things would actually quite frequently take place in the Northern Hemisphere, different conferences. As much as we may not like it, that is truthfully the case. We have even come across a number of global analyses that soon assume June, July, and August are summer months for the entire world. You'd think this kind of mistake would have been caught early on, but no, it still happens. That's a problem of peer review. That's not the problem of the scientific community as a whole, or the fact that seasons exist and are different. That kind of thing. So what exactly is a season? The answer depends on who you ask. It is an astronomical season based on equinoxes and solstices following the solar calendar, or a meteorological one that starts on the first day of the month in the Julian calendar. Even the widely used Western constructs differ in their start dates and definitions. Point being that they are widely used. In the US, yes, most people will go by the astronomical season, starting on solstices and equinoxes for, all the 4 seasons. That's typical. But for most often, and of course, in my field of weather and climate, we do use the meteorological calendar. In Australia, as they talk about, it's common to use the meteorological calendar and start the seasons the first day of the month, whereas in North America, the astronomical seasons are used. Okay, fine. But if you're talking about conferences of weather and climate that you're going to, they would be using meteorological seasons, most likely, rather than astronomical ones, because it's the common definition to their own bloody field. To our own bloody field. So no. And it's not just a matter of temporal accuracy. Many parts of the world experience wet and dry seasons that are not reflected in distinctions between summer and winter. And indigenous communities often use seasonal calendars that align with their local environments, reflecting a deep connection with nature's cycles. Here's the thing I have with that, is this is true. You do have wet and dry seasons. You have monsoon season in different parts of the world and what have you. Numbers of people would be my question, how many share that. And same goes with the indigenous communities' calendars. They have their own calendars, and I respect that. But how many different calendars do you want to work with here that, you use so many different calendars in here that you end up excluding people, you end up not including calendars at all, or what have you. So I don't see the point of the point of this particularly here beyond saying something that is pretty damned obvious to anybody who reads news and things like that, know about monsoon season, and anybody who reads up on it will know that, yeah, different indigenous peoples have their own seasonal calendars. Fine. That align with the local environments. That's fine. What are the most common calendars used? What are the most common calendars used? They are the astronomical calendar and the meteorological calendar. And therefore, they are the appropriate and best choices of calendars for communication when you're talking about seasons. And now we come to the other thing that I wanted to say about why I don't think they're correct to say it's inclusive to just get rid of seasons altogether. Let's work on this based on the notion that, the meteorological calendar and the astronomical calendar are the most common calendars to use. Point 1. Point 2, in here, though Southern Hemisphere winter is the same time as Northern Hemisphere's summer, June, July, August. One thing that there is in common between both is that regardless of the exact time that things occur, winter occurs and it's colder. Wherever you are, it's colder, chillier, not getting hotter, that kind of thing. It's getting colder. Some places it's snowing, of course, but just generally speaking, it gets colder because of what we know about the tilts of the earth and what have you. It just gets colder everywhere, exception being tropical regions, really. The only exception there that I can think of is tropical regions. Their temperatures do not change all that much because they sit right at the equator generally. And so they receive and be the same amount of sunlight year round. Whereas if you are further north or further south of the equator, the amount of sunlight you get depends upon where you are as the Earth is orbiting the sun. And therefore, northern hemisphere winter, the northern hemisphere is tilted further away. Southern hemisphere winter, the southern hemisphere is tilted further away. Okay, common definition there that works for everybody in that case. But we also know that in winter, regardless of when exactly your winter occurs, it's colder, generally speaking, for vast majority of population on planet Earth. And also, for summer, wherever you are, vast majority of population on planet Earth, summer gets hotter. Okay. If you are going to a conference in a different part of the world from yourself, why would you not want to know something about which season it is in that part of the world so that you can be prepared to attend and be comfortable? For example, have it to be in, let's say, of course, yeah, it's January. There's a lot of major meetings actually in the US in December and January. Okay, that's winter in the United States. Wouldn't you want to know that it's winter? And can you not then also link it to yourself in your own head? Okay, it's winter in the Northern Hemisphere, or what is winter a bit like here? And then, oh, it's going to be cold, so I should pack, even though it's summer here right now, I should pack for cold because I'm going into the Northern Hemisphere where it's winter and I know what winter is like. Wouldn't that make sense? That's actually why I think it's not inclusive to just rip the seasons off altogether, given that the most common seasons we work with are meteorological or astronomical, particularly in weather and climate, because we work on the meteorological calendar, frankly. So, yeah. To get to their recommendations here, with that in mind, that you know what winter is like, generally, regardless of whether or not it is exactly your specific winter right where you live. If you're going to a place where it is winter there, wouldn't you want to know that to actually have it be something you can prepare for so you're not feeling excluded by the cold or the hot there? That would be my comment on that. Avoid naming for seasons or communication. Avoid naming seasons for events or communication. Okay. Provide specific dates and months. Okay, fine. I'm all for that, actually. That second one, I will say, I'm all for that if you know when it's going to be. If you know when it's going to be. You, generally speaking, if you're planning far in advance, you may not exactly know when your own conference is going to be. But you can just give a summer 2025. You may know you're going to have it in X city or somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, which is quite likely because most of the land mass is in the Northern Hemisphere and most of the people are in the Northern Hemisphere. That's simply the way it is. Nothing ill about it. Simple fact of life. And so that's the particular thing there I would note on that. Is that you might not have the ability to give someone that precision. So what do? Do you just say, June to August? You could just say summer, because everybody knows what summer is like. Just in terms of a generic representation. Avoid naming seasons for events or communication. Again, why is that? It's funny, I don't know why that's so crucial. Why is that so crucial to attracting an international audience when it's perhaps wanting to know what the climate is like in that time of the year, maybe? You run in there during winter in the Northern Hemisphere, for instance. That kind of thing. Yeah. So that's why I don't see the point of that to begin with. And I don't think it's inclusive to just remove the season altogether. Respect work-life balance consistently around the globe. It's well known August is avoided owing to European holidays. You extend the same courtesy by steering clear of scheduling major events in January when many in the southern hemisphere are on holiday and many in the world are celebrating the Lunar New Year. I apologize. What about Christmas and all the other holidays that are there? Did we forget about all of those too? But anyway, I mean, I don't mind that, to be honest, just for the sake of holidays in general, but then you also got to make sure you can schedule things in time. But you know why a lot of... I can think of one reason why there ends up being events at the end of the calendar year, rather, and at the beginning of the calendar year, why there ends up being a lot of events, is because the other thing you're trying to avoid is twofold here. In a lot of places, the summer being the holidays is also the time for field work for a lot of ecologists. Summer may also be the time for field work in the southern hemisphere, so that's actually quite fair. I could see that as a problem. You're not going to necessarily be able to attend a conference because if you're working in ecology, you might be out somewhere doing surveys of birds, bugs, animals, plants, any number of different kinds of things. But the other reason is there's a break in the academic year owing to those holidays in December and early January. And if you start pushing things into, say, the middle of a semester, in either end, fall or summer semester, that makes it really hard for professors and students to attend, is one thing I noticed. So with that, all that said, I don't think this was a great article to have in Nature, frankly, because it points out to something that isn't really all that much of a problem, I don't think, here. But anyway, let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious.